Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to be here. It's lovely and full circle, and I used to come here as a child, and it's lovely to be back in a different way. I have always craved the feeling of being useful to the world, but fulfilling this need for utility has been a struggle. Like it's the first day of school and I don't know where to stand. At 37, I've moved in many places trying to find my usefulness, and in spite of awkwardness along the way, I'm glad for every experience outside my comfort zone. My most profound growing has happened when I've worked beyond my capabilities with people who have vision. With some people, it has been an artistic vision. With others, it has been a vision for a better world. In the best cases, the art and the altruism meet somewhere near the middle. In this juncture, I have met and worked with and fallen in love with those people who can go out on a limb, balancing precariously over what has come to pass and what they can imagine for the future. To me, there is nothing more beautiful than equal parts risk and hope. These risky and hopeful acts often seem to germinate from a place of love. Love of country, of community, of children not yet here. Sometimes there's a little ego in the mix as well. I'm self-conscious to be invited to speak on notions of social justice for a few reasons. It's early in my journey towards usefulness, and there are people who have obviously given so much for so much longer and have had a far greater impact than me. So I have to acknowledge that this is a humble beginning standing before you. I must admit also that social justice is a term I feel uncomfortable with, probably because of being aggressively branded an SJW. I don't know if this is a term you've come across, but a social justice warrior screamed at my face or with exclamations online, and it's definitely meant to be an insult of the highest order. Alongside that is an understanding of just how slippery justice is as an idea. Justice for whom? Decided by what power? Is justice finite? And when we anoint it to one, does it take from the other? Alongside a discomfort with the term social justice is a discomfort with speaking as a representative of my gender, of women, which is how I identify as a woman. It just seems a little broad. And then, of course, what trumps all of that is my discomfort with speaking at a decidedly Jewish event as a deeply conflicted, out-of-practice Jewish person. And yet, here I am. There is something in me that wants me to be here. Maybe it's my parents. I think that might actually be a lot of it. I do have a nasty habit of publicly throwing the gauntlet, of talking big to make sure that I stay on track. But there's something else that makes me want to be here. I want to share the things that I've learnt about moving from being disappointed, cynical, and essentially inactive to being drawn into the fray with hope and fear and inspiration and actually trying to do something. My ultimate goal is to inspire you to do the same, because right now, as always, the world is in desperate need of you. And there is someone out there pushing an important barrow who needs your muscle for a moment, a season, or a lifetime. The doing is very messy indeed, but the inaction is a far heavier burden. My messy journey of doing started with my being cast in a show called Orange is the New Black in 2013. And it was the story of a women's prison, and its success was in its incredibly human characters. It flipped your expectations about who these women were and how you were expected to relate to them, and it did that with love and humor and heart. The show exposed systematic racism, bureaucratic insanity, and the quicksand of poverty. But mostly, what it did, and did for me personally as well, was catch me in my own prejudices and, in its very gentle way, let you feel, change, and move. During the early seasons of the show, I kept working as a yoga teacher at this large studio in New York City, and it boasted the altruism of its donation-based classes, and lots of folks came in. I once made my mum come in as well. I experienced this saccharine satisfaction as I taught classes of up to 70 people at a time, and I thought idealistically, wow, this room really is for everybody. More on that later on. At the same time, my work on Orange is the New Black helped me dig deeper into a broken justice system, and I started to learn more about the criminal justice reform movement. And then I got involved, and I got inspired, and I wondered if my idealistic yoga teaching and my desire to be part of this movement, a movement that our show was really shining a light on, could be brought together. So I literally searched prison plus yoga. And you know what is funny about this moment, aside from it being so simplistic, is that it was only because of my new profile from the show that I felt I had something to offer. All of my life, in all of my diaries, I've wanted to be part of something bigger, to help and to do more. I'd had a few failed attempts at volunteering, and I assumed I really had nothing to offer, that I could be part of making art and telling stories, but that I had no real use in actively helping or making the world better, no matter how much I wanted it. Now, I know now that was a complete cop-out, but I did let myself believe it. And it annoys me to think of how much time I wasted being afraid. My life changed because of that internet search. Through a website form, I connected with Liberation Prison Yoga founder Annika Lucas, and I went through my first of many trainings with her to become a trauma-informed yoga teacher, and I worked through the Justice Department rigmarole, and I got approved to go into Rikers Island once a week and teach yoga and meditation to women waiting to be sentenced for all manner of things. Yes, everything. Everything from the very mundane to the very violent and very disturbing. I felt strong in holding on to our mandate that we only came to offer healing and no judgment, unconditionally. What a relief it was to come in only armed with that particular kind of love that you can offer a stranger. Learning with Annika was pretty unorthodox because the scope of her lessons were very large. She herself had been a prisoner as a child. Her mother had sold her to a pedophile ring, and her story is harrowing. Around 80% of the women incarcerated in the US have experienced sexual trauma prior to their incarceration. The rates are similar in Australia as well. There are clear reasons why Annika was so drawn to and so good at this work. Beyond profound empathy, Annika had developed a keen understanding of the dynamics of power, and because of that understanding, Beyond profound empathy, Annika had developed a keen understanding of the dynamics of power because that understanding was essential for her survival in her experiences as a child. Over the years working together, I became a board member and eventually a friend. I learnt a lot from Annika. A lot of it was pretty confronting. Her unapologetic take on power and its corrosive impacts and the malignant systems that spring up to protect that power were all new ideas, and they proved really foundational for me. At this point, I met and worked with extraordinary leaders in the criminal justice reform system, and at the same time I fell in love with Jack, my partner, who has made equality his lifelong mission with his organisation AIM, which is running 18 years strong this year. It was a big time of inspiration for me. There were some key female mentors from inside and outside the prison, and they taught me about intersectional feminism and took me to deeper understandings of systematic racism, class warfare, at a time when people laughed at Trump's early signs of running for office. This was also around the time that I came to see that the idealistic donation-based yoga studio that I'd worked for a long time was actually built by a very sick man, based around a very sick power structure. He used bullying in the guise of spiritual growth. He routinely handpicked young, vulnerable women and controlled them with cultish trauma bonding. He used a wild imbalance of age and power to manufacture very unhealthy sexual relationships, all while making money hand over fist. Why had I not seen this before? Why could I not shake my former colleagues, teachers and managers at the studio into seeing it now? A mindset of compliance under power and the systems that spring up to protect it are very powerful. I still feel so ashamed to be attracted to these places of extremity and compliance. Suddenly, I could see very strong connections between my experiences at drama school and some experiences I'd had in the entertainment industry. My desire to please and comply is something I have to keep an eye on. Once Trump was elected, I joined the Resistance Revival Chorus. It was a very cool group of women, non-binary artists, formed from the Women's March. I think we remember the Women's March with the pink hats. We were there, and it was an incredible experience. And we formed after that, and we sang at protests and celebrations and declarations all over New York City. And I was pregnant with our first child, and I was desperate for some hope. And we sang with purposeful joy. And I wanted the seeds of that joy and change in our songs to be woven into our baby's growth and germinate just in time for everything to get better. And I wish I could sing with them now. When we talk about gender balance in leadership roles, I think it's important for me to share that I don't believe that any gender has better or worse leadership capabilities. I think individuals have leadership capabilities that can be shaped in different directions. Good, bad, everything in between. I do believe that when one group from one culture, one gender, one class, one skin color, one life experience holds the concentration of power, the likelihood for that corrosive impact grows exponentially. And when that happens, everyone, including the dominant power, suffers. In 2018, with the 6-month-old girl, all of these lessons and mentors came into focus when I made a deeply uncomfortable decision to speak out against a very powerful former friend and colleague, in corroborating the experiences of a much younger, much less powerful colleague. All avenues for mediation had been shut down. The only options were silence or speak. I spoke for 2 reasons. Number 1, it was the truth. And number 2, I suspected that power would protect power. And I'm sad to say that is exactly how it played out. Lee Sales and the 730 report gave me the opportunity to try to introduce some complexity to what had become a very dangerously simplified discourse around Me Too. A lack of awareness around power imbalance has got us to where we were, and a deeper analysis of ourselves and our power-based systems would be, I believed, and still believe, the least destructive way out. I am not a believer in destroying people for mistakes. I do not believe people are one thing and one thing alone. But taking responsibility and owning behavior has to be the start. And then being allowed by society and by the people who love us to grow from that and not to be frozen in stone is the crucial next step. I have made mistakes, and I am sure I will make more. After the dust had settled, I was relieved to discover that being forced to talk about these ideas publicly hadn't killed me. I had lost some things, and there was a lot of discomfort, but I was okay. A year later, we were choking on bushfire smoke. It was late 2019. And on the south coast, I was obsessively checking the sky for flying embers and desperately seeking some powerful leadership from somewhere, anywhere. And my urge to be useful, to do something, anything, came back hard and fast. And there was my old soapbox in the corner. It was really all I had, that and the ability to make an example of myself. So with Jack's support, we threw away all the plans we'd worked hard to make real. We abandoned our green cards and our life in the US, and I had been there for 7 years and imagined we'd be there for a lot longer. We did all this so that I could publicly make a commitment to CO2 reduction and to try to do something positive at home on this continent, a country with the most to lose from climate change impacts, a country that consumes and exports more CO2 than almost everybody else. I had no idea how I was going to come good on this promise. The declarations I had made about accountability had suddenly landed me in conversations on CNN and BBC, but it was all formless and based in panic. This is this nasty gauntlet throwing habit that I mentioned before, making stakes that I don't know how I'm going to kind of fill in, but do it retroactively. So after that, I signed up to university to study sustainability at Wollongong University. I graduated from the Imagination University run by AIM. I graduated from Al Gore's climate project, you name it, I did it. I spoke to loads of generous people working in climate action to find some kind of way to back up my grandiose proclamations. And all of these people seemed so strong and rock solid in their path to fixing this mess. And I was jealous of them. Since then, I've realized my obvious mistake. People like this, fighting with every tool available, are powered by the most delicate stuff of all, hope. Their bravery is in knowing that their hope is tender and deciding to work with it anyway. It took some time and some awkward pathways, but I can now say that my climate terror has blossomed into something with form, practical application, and a heap of volunteer energy in the form of an environmental organisation called Hi Neighbour. Hi Neighbour is based in the Illawarra and Dharawal country where we live, and this place is a coal and steel region, and we're staring at an imminent transition to a low-carbon future. And for those of us who haven't given up more than a disposable coffee cup, this is a cause for celebration, absolutely. But there are others who have livelihoods and generations of identity in fossil fuel jobs, and they have way more to lose. I have realized along my messy journey that a transition of any kind that doesn't include everybody is not a success. For me, climate change is as much a social challenge as it is an environmental one. Okay, so now it's August 26th? What is the date today? 28th, okay. I'm pregnant, forgive me. It's August 28th, it's 2022. And I'd like to tell you a little bit, the tiniest bit, about what I've built from this doing journey, this messy doing journey that I've just described. An organisation called Hi Neighbour, and how we are tackling this dynamic challenge on a practical level. So there are two key elements: solar rooftops and scholarships. Scholarships. That's a bad joke. Hi Neighbour uses funds from solar projects to power scholarships for local workers to train in low carbon jobs. With our solar rooftops, we make renewables accessible and we lower CO2. And with our scholarships, we bring community together where there is fracture by remembering that the folks who work in fossil fuel industries are actually the champions of this change. Solidifying this exciting intersectional learning into an organisation has been very hard one for me. And it's also deeply satisfying. It doesn't come without all the experiences I've described and many more. And I know that there is so much more to come and so much more to learn. What I know without doubt is that these movements of change need support, generosity in energy, enthusiasm, inspiration, money, time, and just someone to push the barrow for a moment, or a season, or a lifetime. So don't fool yourself into thinking that you have nothing to offer, because the only thing harder than the doing is doing nothing at all. Thank you.